Oh, I got a double.
Give me your camera.
I got a double. I got it.
Go ahead, I got one.
We got a double. There's one. There's one. Woo. There we go. He ain't huge, but you know what? He's gonna count. He's gonna count. There he is. There he is, baby.
Tug on the line.
Woo! Hello. Part of the double. Nice catfish. I think it's the biggest one of the day so far. Haven't got some huge ones, but beautiful fish here on chicken soaked in catfish nectar. We'll try to get some more.
We were fishing in Chickamauga Reservoir, which is a huge reservoir on the Tennessee River. It's about 36,000 acres, and it's what they call a mainstream reservoir, primarily for flood control. Is the biggest function of it, controlled by TVA, and it's just got an immense amount of habitat. It's more of a deep water fishery. That's about our average size right there. The average we catch is 5 to 10 pounds. That's probably about 8 or 9. So it's more of a deep water fishery. Typically up there you're fishing, when you're catfishing, you're fishing anywhere from 20 feet of water to some places as deep as 70 feet of water. You can anchor fish, where you anchor down, throw a whole bunch of rods out, just sit and wait for the catfish to come to you. Or the way we were fishing, we were drift fishing, which is what I really prefer, where it's similar to deep sea fishing. If you've been out deep sea fishing where you're dropping a big weight down on the bottom and just letting it bounce along on the bottom, that's basically what we were doing for those catfish up on the lake this morning.
He's not big, man, but he pulls some head shakes.
There he is.
You can see it, man. He sucked it all down. Check this little guy out. It's about the average size we've been finding out here. Beautiful fish. A couple bigger, a couple smaller. Got one, first one on the board for me. First one's the hardest one. Get him out of the way. We're about to find his big brother.
So when I'm drift fishing for catfish, like I mentioned, it was similar to deep sea fishing, and it really is. And I use what's called a three-way rig, where you have a three-way swivel. And if you're a bass fisherman, you might compare it to a drop shot. It's just almost like a drop shot when you're bass fishing. I've got a 3-ounce sinker off of my lead line that's a lot longer than my hook leader. And so when that sinker's bouncing the bottom, that bait is suspended, depending on how long you make your lead line, 2 feet off the bottom. And so you can keep that sinker right on the bottom, but your hook doesn't drag the bottom, so you don't hang up quite as much. I'm a big believer in circle hooks. These are Team Catfish circle hooks. This is a 5/0 Team Catfish D84Z. And I like the circle hooks because you rarely, if ever, deep hook a fish. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be hooked right in the corner of the mouth. So you really don't hurt your fish. I fish it on a 60-pound test leader. I'm using a 50-pound braid as my main line, and that braid line has no stretch to it, so it's incredibly sensitive. So you can feel that sinker thump up and down off the bottom. First thought he'd be a little bit better when he...
Oh, I got one. I got a double. Roll that real quick. Let me hook him up. I got one. We got a double. Come on. This would be 3 for 10. This might be a little bit better. I don't know. Nope. Because he wrapped himself.
Yeah, he wrapped up. He wrapped up. That's the downside of the three-way rigs. It's real bad to wrap up in the three-way rigs. The south wind, we had a really hard south wind, which doesn't really affect the fish, but we like to drift with the current. Even though it's a lake, you still have a slight amount of current. So when you're drift fishing, you like to drift along downstream with the current, even though it's very slow. And we couldn't do that this morning because we had a horrible wind. So I was having to use the trolling motor to basically fight our way downstream. And it makes your presentation a little bit more difficult. You know, people think catfish, you just throw a bait out there on the bottom, wait for a catfish to come along and eat it. But the truth is that presentation, how you present a bait to them, really makes a tremendous amount of difference.
Boy, it's starting to come down out here. Fishing in a torrential downpour. You can see how much you can barely see outside the boat. It's coming down so hard. Now all we need is a bite.
I'm waiting for a little tug in the rain. Not a big guy. Definitely not a big guy, but boy, he took it.
Today's episode of Pautzke Outdoors comes to you from a soaking wet, rain-filled day in East Tennessee. As you can see, we went out with guide Richard Sims today. He's somebody that knows these catfish just like he knows his own kids. It's pretty amazing. He always knows where they're going to be. But you know what? Today was one of those days where we didn't know if they were going to bite. Why? Well, we had a temperature drop of almost 25 degrees this morning. A huge cold front came in. As you can see, the south wind created havoc on us as we tried to troll with the current. And then we also had issues with rain. Some of the toughest, hardest, rain came through, and it made it real tough for us to stay out there. We also got pushed away by thunder and lightning a few times, but we still caught a lot of fish. Now, you can see Dustin and I, we had a little bit of trouble. We went 9 for 19. Now, what did we do? We used Pautzke Catfish Nectar soaked in regular chicken. We had Richard soak it the night before and bring it. He wanted to use his own bait, which would make a great test for us. What is his own bait? Regular raw chicken. You can see the difference between the two. One looks like raw chicken, the other one looks like red chicken. That's the catfish nectar soaked in those baits. Now, you can see us first timers had a little trouble hooking some of the fish, but you know what? We ended up catching a lot of fish and had a great morning while using 2 baits today. Catfish nectar, soaked chicken, and regular chicken. Turned out to be a great opportunity for us to see if this bait really worked. To be honest, Richard wasn't convinced that it did work before we brought us fishing. By the end of the day, he became a believer, just like we did.